All right, cool. That should be enough silence. So I'm going to go ahead and do the intro and we will
Mhm.
go. Hey, everybody. I'm Jesse,
And I'm Maeve.
and this is Boring Conversation.
Welcome to Boring Conversation, a Malifaux podcast.
All right, welcome back to Boring Conversation, everybody. Today, we have a very special episode. Amazingly enough, we actually managed to record promptly after the errata drop for once, and we're going to give you all some hot takes.
That's
So,
only because there's a break from school at the moment.
yes, it's fortuitous timing. Thanks for that, Weird.
Thanks, weird.
So before anything else, we actually did announce this during a live stream game that we had a couple of weeks ago, but I wanted to officially welcome Maeve as one of the new co-hosts of Boring Conversation. Welcome, Maeve.
Yay, I'm excited. I've
Yes.
had a good time being a guest, so it's nice to step up and do some more work and
Yeah,
take
she
some.
figured if she hung around long enough, eventually, something would come of it, right?
Right, exactly.
And clearly you need more content creation in your life,
Oh,
don't you?
clearly. I
Yeah.
definitely don't overdo it ever.
So we'll get back to how badly you're overdoing it in just a sec here. But before we do that, what are you drinking tonight, Maeve?
I have finished it up because I do have work in a little while, but I was drinking one of my beautiful Guinnesses. I love them so much. So, just your classic Guinness stout, the
Rocking.
best.
Rocking. I am drinking a Mayflower Brewing Company right out of Plymouth, Massachusetts, 2022 edition Thanksgiving Ale, which is a delightful beer. It's actually one of my favorites. I look forward to it every year. According to the can, it is an English-style old ale brewed with a rich array of barley and rye malts, aged on toasted American oak. This full-bodied brew is perfect for America's hometown holiday. How about
I
that?
love I love oak brewed
And it
alcohol.
is a turkey on the can. I know none of you can see
Yeah,
it, but Maeve can see it. It's a turkey.
there's a
Anyway,
there's a vineyard, well, not a vineyard, but a what do you call places that make wine? Brain's not working.
vineyard, yeah,
Yeah. Well, they don't have
winery,
the
whatever
vineyards
you want to
because
call it. It's a winery.
the thing about North Carolina is that the coast actually has a blight and they can't grow grapes.
Hmm,
They have to grow them in the western side of the state and then transport them to the east. So
gotcha.
they have a winery, but they don't have
But
a
they import the
vineyard.
juice, right?
But they have a white wine that is oak aged, and it is the best. Oh my god, it's the best wine, hands
To
down. I
die
love
for.
it.
Yeah, this style of beer, the English Old Ale, is one that's like really, really, really hard to find. It's just not commonly brewed in the States. So that's one of the biggest reasons that I look forward to this every year. It's nice, kind of big, chewy, full-bodied, wonderful, wonderful beer. But enough about drinks. Maeve, why don't you tell everybody how neck deep or eyeball deep or in the deep end you are
Yes,
with your content
absolutely.
creation? Where are you at?
Absolutely. So I have this podcast now that I'm going to jump on and be co-host for and take on some responsibilities. I have the Bayou Breakdown, which I like because it's a different feel, I think, than this podcast. So, um, I get to it when I get to it, and I need to get back to it, honestly. And then in late January, I am premiering my own RPG podcast called Foxtail Games, where we are going to be doing several seasons a year where we take on an independent game, something, not necessarily one of the mainstreams, and try it out, play it, and have fun. The first game we're doing is Curse of the House of Rookwood, um, which is a horror game in the style of like Edgar Allan Poe.
Hmm.
And I have our friends of the show, Nathan, Jim Dyson, and the Nick Westbrook on the show. So it should be really good. And we'll roll that out probably in late January.
That is pretty darn cool.
I'm very excited. It's a lot of fun.
Darn cool. So I don't have any new content creation stuff to announce aside from the fact that I've recently started working on some more collaborations with the Danger Planet YouTube channel. Keep your eyes on the Danger Planet feed because you should actually start seeing them releases related to it very, very soon. I'll just go ahead and spoil it here. Sorry, Doug and Danger Planet folks, but we are continuing our coverage of the Faction Focus series that we put together with the Danger Planet team. And we're going to be basically adding individual episodes for the new Madness of Malifaux Masters. So we've already recorded 4 of them, and we'll probably record the remaining ones after the holidays. There you go.
Very cool.
Yeah, so probably the biggest news coming up here is Captain Con. Anybody that has paid attention to basically any weird social media channel or Discord has probably seen me spamming it. Sorry, you're all probably sick of it by now. As of today, this day's recording, we actually have 10 content creation channels already signed up and confirmed, and actually 2 of those channels are going to be sending 2 teams apiece. So last year we had 10 teams. This year we're actually beating that number at 12 teams. And I still have a couple of places that I'm waiting on responses from with some maybes. So I would not be at all surprised if we end up somewhere around, I would say, 13 to 14 teams if all goes well, which is fantastic. That'll make for an extremely fun event. And then also it'll make sure that the 2-day 5-round Gaining Grounds event that I'll be running on Saturday and Sunday starts out with dang near 28 people, which is pretty impressive. And that's before any of the public has registered. So
how many spaces do we have open for the GT?
The con has said that they can give me as much space as we need. Perfect. And what I'm planning on doing is I am going to be instituting a 3rd tiebreaker in the standings, just in case we have some ties up near the top. That way we can get a more definite winner, even if we end up at 40 plus players. Awesome. I'm going to actually be integrating strength of schedule in as a 3rd tiebreaker behind diff and total VP scored. That way things are a little bit cleaner.
I think strength of schedule is a good eventual topic for talking about competitive.
Another topic for another day. One that I have strong feelings about.
But yeah, last year was so much fun at Captain Con. If you guys can get out to Rhode Island, please come out and play. Like it's almost as good for the play as it is for hanging out with the people that are there. Like last year, we went out in the snow and ice and had beers and nachos, and it was great. Some people probably got a little too much alcohol in them.
We only had 3 drops on day 2. That's better than I thought it would be.
It was, but we had a blast. And of course, if you are around it is almost a guarantee that the Danger Planet guys are going to be finding a karaoke bar and causing some chaos.
And probably causing at least 1 drop the next day. Yes.
Probably. But it's worth it. It's a lot of fun. Please come if you can. The community of Malifaux is the reason we play this game.
Yeah. I'm actually going to be recording a solo ep tomorrow. So that just like a quick 10-minute thing with just a breakdown of kind of how the convention works and kind of critical dates, cutoffs, that kind of thing. But one thing I want to plug here before we move on to the meat of the episode is that I've decided that I'm going to take a page out of the UK Nationals book this time because we do have so many players coming. It's not up near the 100 players like they had for the UK Nationals, but it's still a lot of folks, and it's a lot more than we've ever hosted, and certainly more than I've ever hosted an event for. So I'm actually going to be instituting a pretty cool little side competition where we're going to be giving out an award for the best table of terrain provided by an attendee. So for anybody who's got some strong hobby chops, you want to, bring along, a mat if you can swing it and a table worth of terrain. This is probably going to be more for some of the local folks or folks that just have a lot of space in their check bag. You bring a table of terrain, enter it into the competition, and then we'll be doing some judging and hand out a special award for the coolest looking table at the con, which I think is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I definitely will not be participating in that. I'm coming from North Carolina on a plane. Um, I'm not bringing the whole terrain box on a plane.
No, you
Absolutely
don't want to do that.
not. I'll ship it to you. How about that? And then you can
There you
ship it
go.
back.
Perfect. Perfect. So that's Captain Con in a nutshell. Again, you're going to hear some more about it probably tomorrow when I do my little quick 10-minute solo episode. But looking forward to seeing everybody there. And you're going to just have to continue tolerating me plugging away on a weird place and everywhere else about it. So there you go. But as far as today's topic, what are we talking about, Maeve?
We are talking about the brand new November 22, well, errata, and we're just going to be looking at, like, there's a lot of things happening here. So yes, models were changed. We finally saw some application of nerfs to bring some of the more egregious title masters back down to earth a little bit. But we're also seeing a lot of rule changes and fact clarifications that are probably maybe even more important than what's going on with the masters.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that's pretty neat with this particular errata is I I would say that between the new book release where most folks just got their copies of the book that was released on Black Friday within the last probably week or two at most. I know I got mine a little bit on the later side. We have all these new masters and all these new models in Madness of Malifaux, and then we also have a pretty extensive errata cycle, including model changes, rule changes, and some pretty significant FAQs. I would venture to guess that this is probably one of the larger shakeups in a short period of time that the game has seen in a long time.
Yeah, for sure. And necessary, right? Like
Yeah,
titles really change the game. So of course we were going to see and honestly titles were done in a way, like the original masters were done when third edition was, they didn't know what they could do with it yet. They were still kind of tied into what second edition was and the identity of second edition. And you can see that in the third edition, like non-title masters. And it was a little more simple. And then the titles came in and they started adding some more complex and interesting things. And of course, it was going to be a little over the top in some places. So I think this is probably a very, very healthy change overall.
yeah, I would definitely say so. And I mean, especially for the very large number of changes and some of these masters, I mean, man, oh man, I mean, like Lady J2 basically has like a whole new card. I mean, there were drastic and sweeping changes made to some of these models.
And it really looks to me like they didn't necessarily touch the overpowered stuff. They touched the negative play experiences. So in general, a lot of this is stuff that people just like did not enjoy playing against.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there were certainly some things that were power level corrections, but I do think that most of this stuff was fixing NPEs, which a lot of times power level does play a significant part
Mhm.
in that.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah. So basically, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna start with the Arcanists in the errata pack, and we're just gonna walk through. We're not necessarily gonna talk about every single change on the model ad nauseum and lay them out line by line. I'm just gonna be totally honest, and I'm sure Maeve feels the same way. But we don't necessarily play every single one of these masters. Some of them I personally have never even played against. So between the two of us, I think that we can probably come up with some pretty educated opinions. There may be some that one of us defers to the other on, but hey, we'll just work through it and go from there. When we get down to the rules changes, they're really, there are a few things that are very, very key that we'll talk about. But for the most part, we don't really need to talk about things like, falling and some other stuff like that. The simple stuff, the cleanup. But Maeve, why don't you take us away? Start with Arcanist. What do we
All
got
right,
here?
cool. So we got Mayfang. And the title of Mayfang hasn't seen a whole lot of like stir up, except in the super disgusting duel master list with Hoffman Inventor. But what we saw with Mayfang is that she could summon for basically free. Like
Yeah.
all of her uh, Metal Gammon just popped up for 2 markers. It was a little ridiculous. It was so easy for her screw to spam markers.
Yeah.
So I think what we've seen here is taking away a little bit of her efficiency.
Yeah.
So they've kind of
Yeah.
made her, you have to actually do work to get stuff done,
Hmm.
which is important. Resource management is important in a game like this. So I don't think anything really happened to her that is that breaks
No.
her any and makes her unplayable or anything like that. She just needs 3 markers instead of 2 um to make gammon. She got heated iron turned into an aura. They increased the TN of lay track by a lot, but they also reduced the TN to resist it. So I think this puts her in a pretty good
Yeah.
place where she's still fairly competitive without being just autoplay, right?
Yep.
You can't just autopilot her anymore.
I've played quite a bit of Mayfang too, so I'm pretty well familiar with her. And it's exactly all the stuff that Maeve just said. I mean, the big thing with Steelcraft, the Gammon summoning thing, is that it always required 2 markers, but in reality, it really only required 1 because after the Gammon that you summon activates, it drops a marker in base contact with itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically a net 1 marker to summon a Gammon and just spending an AP with no flip. She still doesn't have to flip a card to do it. It's still the same range. Boohoo, now you need to get rid of 3 markers, which turns into 2 after the Gammon activates. Like, okay, that's fair. Lay track, TN increased by 2, but stat also increased by 1, so basically a net 1 increase. Like, who cares? It's slightly easier for your opponent to resist the damage or gain stunned. Again, minor balance change. I think it went from a 13 to a 12, so nothing game breaking. Heated iron is the thing where she pings a model for damage when a scrap marker is dropped in base contact. It always should have been an aura because it really was silly that you could do it without having to worry about line of sight,
Yeah.
especially in a crew that has a bunch of large size models that can block line of sight. It kind of got around that weakness. So everything that we see here is just kind of a little bit of a balance change, a little bit of health of the game change, and it just should make her a little bit less oppressive to play into if you don't expect what's coming.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
totally fine.
Absolutely. You want to talk
So,
about Bayou next?
oh boy. Okay, so I'm not going to soapbox too much here. I'm going to preface this by saying all of the changes in Bayou, I think, were to one degree or another warranted. The models that did get changed, well, we'll just start with this. We'll just go with Ophelia 2 or Ophelia Overloaded. So, long story short, with her, she used to be able to hand out her upgrades to her friendly models, which would then be able to take shots with them and discard them afterwards. Big changes there are that all of the upgrades handed out stat 6 attacks, which in most cases were higher stat than the base attack of the model that would be using them. And they all had the bigger they are front of card ability, where if they're attacking a model that's a larger size than them, then they get +1 to the duel total. So it essentially meant that she could hand out upgrades to all of the models in her keyword that gave them stat 7 ranged attacks, which was pretty dumb.
Yeah, especially in the case of raiders where they could also be on a positive to the
Yeah,
attack. So stat
yeah,
7 on a positive, just kind of silly.
real stupid on a model that normally has like a stat 5 8-inch gun
Yep.
and is super squishy, so you don't want it anywhere near combat. Yeah,
Yep.
totally reasonable. Probably should have been that way from jump. The other 2 changes I feel are I'll skip the middle one for a sec. Raiding operation was her bonus action. Basically, it didn't require any kind of a flip. You could pick any models in line of sight regardless of range, and then you could discard an upgrade on them to gain an effect, which you get to choose. It could be one of a couple of things. Now they put a range on it. Still doesn't need. Still needs line of sight. So 12-inch range, line of sight. It has a base TN of 8, and it has a stat of 6, so it only needs a 2 to go off. But you add +2 to the TN for each model up to 3 that are chosen. So realistically, that means that it's going to have a minimum TN of 10 versus a stat 6. And then if you go up to 3 models, then you're looking at a TN 14 versus a stat 6, so you need an 8. That's pretty fair. I do think that the no range was pretty silly. Um, Not having to flip any cards for such a powerful effect, also pretty silly. So that seems pretty reasonable.
And it's a 12-inch range. It's not like 12 inches is a
It's
lot,
fine. It's a lot.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
And also, like, yes, you need an 8 for like for 3 models, but I don't know about you, but most often I was really only doing it for 1, maybe 2 models, usually
yeah.
by after turn 1 or so.
Yep. Turn one, you do it for 3 models. Turn two, you do it for 2 models. And then after that, it's probably
Yeah.
one or two. So,
Because in general, you're going to want the upgrades on the model. Like, you're going to spend the turn putting the upgrades you want to use
mm-hmm.
on the models.
Yep.
So,
Or they're just not going to be in line of sight. I mean, they're all size 1, so it's pretty easy to cut line of sight between them and Ophelia.
I'll be interested to see how this plays out because
Yeah.
we did see Ophelia's keyword get a little bit of a hit last errata. So it'll be interesting to see where she falls. I do think she was in the very top like percentage of Bayou with her
Yeah,
title
definitely.
already. I don't know that she's fallen that far with this nerf. Um, I think if you still like shooty crews, she's the shootiest crew.
Yep.
Um, and she still does what she does, but you might have to adjust. You're probably not taking 2 or 3 raiders anymore.
Yeah.
You know.
I think my biggest concern is it's kind of funny because on the one hand, I feel like this is good for the game in general, and I don't feel like there should be so much of it. But I feel like it also puts Ophelia kind of behind a lot of other top tier crews, and that was the change to give me that back, where basically anytime a model or anytime one of her kin models discarded one of her arsenal upgrades for any reason, meaning for raiding operation or for taking a shot, you could discard a card to give them focus 1. So free focus is always awesome, um, especially with a crew that has a sniper, like a reasonably costed 7 stone sniper with like a good damage track that you take all the time. Typically, which is Rami. Um, Without that, you really have to jump through some hoops to get him to focus 2 on turn 1 so that he could take a focused shot using the sniper ability. Now, that said, you can instead focus on maybe moving him up the field a little bit more with other models instead of stacking the focus. That way, you can take a focus shot at 14.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, focus pulses are good.
Mm-hmm.
Ma's been able to do it forever. They nerfed that, so it was once per activation. Rezzers, conceivably speaking, have multiple ways that they can give out focus pulses with Blasphemous Ritual. It was too good in Nekoma, so they kind of took that away as well. Like, giving out free focus en masse is extremely powerful, and I think it's one of the things that can really separate a really, really strong crew from kind of the rest of the pack.
Yep.
I'm a little bummed to see Ophelia lose it, especially where she has to jump through some hoops to set it up already, whereas a lot of other crews kind of still have access to it. So gives me some kind of conflicted emotions there, but we'll see how it turns out.
All right. So, Brewmaster.
I'm going to let you take the lead on this one because you've played a lot more Brewmaster than me.
I love Moonshiner. I love the way he played. I had a blast with him, but I will recognize that he needed a change. He had way too little ability to interact or to be interacted with. All of the things he did, he could just do, and your opponent didn't really have a lot of.
Yeah.
You didn't have a lot to do with it. It was not a fun game for your opponent. It really wasn't. And also, there was just so much like I play really, really, really fast in this game, and I struggled to end games with Brewmaster because you have to keep up with how much poison you're doing and so many out of activation movements and things like that. And this new Brewmaster condenses things. Your unpack is going to be a lot less frustrating and a lot less important. Um, you're not going to be relying on getting everybody dumped with poison. He definitely lost. He probably went from like arguably the top master in Bayou to above middle of the pack, but not not in the top tier. He's still a lot of fun to play. So what they did was they changed Barroom Brawl. It's after Brewmaster moves itself or another model. Important to know that also means enemy models.
Mm-hmm.
It can reduce poison by 1 on that model. If it's in base contact with an enemy, they take 1 damage. You can only suffer 1 damage per. So this is kind of cool because like his attack hits people and moves them. So he can punch someone, move them into a friend, deal 1 damage to that friend, and then he can turn around and punch the friend, move them into the person you just punched, and deal 1 damage back to them. Fun little things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, he still has another round which pushes things. That got changed to it only gives out poison 2. You push any models that fail to resist it, up to 3, and models can only be pushed this way once per turn. Important to know, we'll talk about rules changes. The shot or the ability to auto fail simple duels, very important for this. Especially when it comes to time management and hand management and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Definitely.
Open the gourd is now until end of phase. That should have happened
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, until the next time Brewmaster activates was a little silly.
Yeah, no, it was definitely exploitable. And Tipsy Slide, there is no end of the turn movement. It's now during the start phase. You can choose 3 models with poison condition within 8 of him. You push them up to 5 inches based on their poison condition. It's only 3 models, nowhere near as exploitive as it used to be.
Yeah, you can't deny scoring like crazy at the end of the turn.
Doesn't break the scoring aspects of the game. Is it going to be harder to play him? A little bit.
Yeah.
But you're not loading up every single model with poison anymore. You're getting Shoujo, you're getting your monks, and you're probably getting your whiskey golem because he's going to be in there doing things. So you're not having to bunch everybody together, throw poison on everybody, move them up 1,000 times in a turn. It's more simple. It's easier to pilot, and easier to on your opponent and you, so you can have a decent game both ways. I kind of am gonna miss how insane he used to be, but arguably it's much better for the game for him to be like this.
Yeah, and a couple of just observations on that. I mean, one big thing with Barroom Brawl, where that's the one where you can push Brewmaster can either push itself or another model, reduce the poison condition, and have it deal a damage to a model in base contact with itself. One important note there is that, as far as I know, according to the rules, a model is always in base contact with itself, so you can move a model and deal a damage to it using that interaction. The other thing is that because he has a little bit less movement potential with the another round ability, I do feel like it's going to kind of further increase the value of the Whiskey Gammon and his crew, because now they really are going to be the only truly speedy model that he has access to, aside from maybe like, what do you call it? His henchman there, whatever he's called.
Popcorn.
Yeah. So having a cheap, fast model is always a good thing. And I do think that, they were seeing some play when Brewmaster first came out. I feel like they kind of fell by the wayside when some of his other interactions came to light. But I do feel like they're going to
for sure,
probably see some table time again.
Under the old Brewmaster, Furman and River Monks were just absolutely nuts. And this does take them down a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
A 12 cups Furman and River Monk is not going to just be without any interaction from your opponent wiping the board anymore.
Yeah. Still pretty darn good, though.
Still good. I think you're probably going to be holding more cards for their Ram Trigger.
Yeah, definitely. That you're going to use that quite a bit more. But yeah, I mean, overall, I feel like the Bayou changes were more or less reasonable. I think all the Brewmaster changes were very reasonable. Ophelia, I'm a little up in the air on. We'll see how it plays out on the table. But Explorers, what do we got next, Maeve?
Maxine
2. So tell us a little bit about Maxine 2.
Okay, so one of the things about Maxine that people were really, if you've ever been under the power of Maxine plus Harada just literally walking up and shoving their foot straight through all of your models. It was awful
Yeah.
because Maxine's main attack was versus willpower, and Harada has the ability that makes you on negatives against willpower attacks. So that combo was absolutely brutal. And then you followed it up with the just massive amount of healing that Maxine could do. So you had to work so hard to take down her models. Um, they've changed a lot with her. They changed her shockwave. You can only heal from her breach burn ability once per activation, so they cut her
Yeah.
healing down a little bit. That was
Cut
important.
it down potentially a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
there were games that I played against Max where I would, knock her or Harada down by six or so wounds, and then I would see them heal back up 4 or 5 in one
Yeah.
activation just passively without dedicating any resources to it. It was
Absolutely.
really, really silly.
Her main attack is now resisted by movement, and it gives out staggered instead of injured. So the first time so that's good and bad, like because it's not the willpower, so it's not she doesn't rely on Harada as much. But it also means that her first attack's gonna, if it lands, is gonna hit you really hard. Um, and she has two
Yeah.
ways to give out staggered.
Yeah.
So
And since her main attack targets move now,
yeah,
hitting them once with staggered is better than hitting them twice in terms of Max's own attacks,
yep.
which is pretty significant.
I think we will have to wait and see when it comes to this new version of Maxine. Things have changed so sort of like fundamentally for like how she wants to play that I think it's going to be a matter of like sitting back and waiting and seeing, like what people do with her now. She kind of is pulled away from the yoke of always having Harada, and the thing is like if you killed Harada early, she just stopped working all that well. Um so I'm kind of curious to see if that's going to free her up a little bit for building lists. And I mean, staggered plus resisted by move is kind of gross.
Yeah, and like just having played against it a bunch of times, like to your point, if Harada gets in on you, all of a sudden you've got Max landing a bunch of attacks that are pretty uninteractive. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you'll get lucky and on a negative flip high. It can happen. You still can't cheat. So a lot of times what happens is she just swings on you 3 times and you're like, well, I guess I'm getting hit 3 times and there's just nothing I can do about it.
Yep.
Not interactive, not fun to play against. Um, One thing I will say is because of her ability to move enemy models around between like massive tentacles and converging ley lines, her shockwave attack, her now being able to give out staggered in 2 different ways actually makes it pretty obnoxious for opponents if you end up using your various tricks during Max's activation to put them like on the opposite side of her model far away from their crew and they're also staggered. Like there's not a whole lot that your opponent can do to pull them back at that point. So I feel like just, on looking at it on face, her playstyle is probably going to change a little bit to having to be a little more conservative because she can't necessarily rely on slamming in those attacks, but being a pretty decent little kidnapping master. I mean, just moving, you can't necessarily guarantee that your opponent's going to fail the converging ley lines, but if Harada's next to him, they're still at a negative flip because that still targets willpower. So if you can land that, and then massive tentacles them once or twice, like they're going to be in a bad spot.
The other thing about Split Up Across Worlds is once again this is another master that the rules change about um, being able to just auto fail friendly simple duels is
Mm-hmm.
going to be big because you don't have to flip for any of her split across whirl or converging ley lines on her
Yeah.
friendly models. So they just
Yep.
get to push. You don't get to use cards out of your hand. And if you get the trigger, suddenly you're removing any awful conditions that your opponent put on your guys, all
Yeah.
of your
Pretty
guys
slick.
for free.
So
Real
I know
cool.
some folks are kind of doom and gloom about these changes. She doesn't get the super unfun, uninteractive OP combo anymore, and she has to play the way that she was probably intended to play in the
Yeah.
first place.
Yeah.
I think she'll be fine. I mean, Max 1 is super strong. She just is kind of a big brain approach. You can't just take Max 2 and, apply fist to face anymore. So yeah. Next, kids, your babies, your poor beautiful babies.
I played them all through Captain Con. I loved them. They are great. And this is probably the only change that I'm actually pretty down on. Not that I didn't think that they needed a change, because they definitely
Yeah.
did. But I feel like every single aspect of their card was changed somehow. And it, it's brutal also because Nexus 1 is not in a great spot either.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm a little worried that this might have been a bit too overboard. So now they have to hire their totems. They have to spend soul stones on their totems now. Which,
I don't actually think that's that bad. I'm just going to be honest. I think it's fine because their totems are what? Cost 3?
yeah. And they needed some way to mitigate that insane level
Yeah.
of, you already have what, 6 activations, or the
9. You start with
9.
9 activations.
Yeah, coming out the woodwork. Like, that's just crazy.
Yeah. And then now you have to pay 6 stones for your 2 totems, which give you 4 more activations, but they're also from the shadows, which
Yeah.
is the equivalent of basically 3 actions for most models, maybe more. So still a lot of efficiency, but you got to pay 6 stones for it, which I think is reasonable.
Yeah, for sure. Burrowed in the Spine has changed. Now it basically has the same timer as, it basically doesn't allow you to stack anymore. Only one of the kids gets to burrow into the spine now, so you're not like just multi slamming someone as soon as
Yeah.
they get a parasite token, which is good. I think that's very important.
Yeah. That amount of unresisted damage and healing is a little silly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Forced Reaction also got the same timing as Chi. I think that's important as well.
Yeah.
It was a little,
Very.
it was super frustrating to play
Oh,
against
God,
them and
yeah.
be like, oh, what did you flip? No, actually not. Like, you'd already chose not to cheat, so eat it.
Yeah.
That was ridiculous and should be changed.
Or you cheat a card and then your opponent's like, oh, -2? Sorry?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what to tell you.
You also cannot stack Join Us anymore
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
be able to summon multiple eyes and ears off of one model.
Yeah.
Um,
That's housekeeping. I mean, that
yeah, yeah,
obviously
yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
intended to be that way, but some degenerates out there, not naming anybody.
yeah. Um, but then we get into some of the other things. Drain Life lost a stat. Will of the Many is now needs a 6. Join the Hive now needs a 6. Secret Mission was completely removed from their card. Playthings can only move their self and 2 others, and they each lost a health from 7 to 6. These guys are so much less survivable, and
Yeah.
I'm very, very worried that gun heavy crews are just going to remove them from the table before they get a chance to
Yeah.
do anything.
I think of all the stuff that we've seen, because there's a lot to kind of parse there, you know? I mean, you having played them a lot, I having played against them a lot. I mean, there's a couple things in here that make a lot of sense to me. I think that the health reduced from 7 to 6 was a bridge too far because that puts them within 2 or 3 shot range for models that would have otherwise had to spend an extra AP or some focus or something like that.
I think the Drain Light stat is bad too. Like, a master should not have a 5 stat main attack. Just
Well, so I get that, but hear me out. It's 9 AP potentially worth of stat 5 versus stat 6 attacks. I agree that a master probably shouldn't have a stat 5, but you know what? Mawtucket has a stat 5 on Handful of Snakes, and I still use that all the time. To be fair, that keyword can hand out injured. This one doesn't have as much access to that, but I think for 9 AP, the primary attack having so much gas in the tank between the damage and the healing, and I think that they can give out what do you call it? That's where Join Us. Yeah, that's where it is. That's how they give out the parasite tokens with Join Us. Like, that drain life, also potentially dealing some extra damage if you're close by because of Burrowed into the Spine. Like, I think the stat 6 was probably too much.
Yeah. And I understand why they made all these changes, because they're basically looking at, like, we want to get these guys done once. We don't want to have to revisit problems on these cards. But like I said, this is the one that I think that they may have just gone a little bit too far. Remains to be seen. Somebody might be able to pull them in and go to town with them still. I don't think they're completely
No.
unplayable, but
No.
I think that you are going to have to be like, guns are big right now. Range attacks are very big in this game, and I think they're going to go down to range really quickly. So you're going to have to play so much cagier with them than you used to, which is probably a good thing. All in all,
Yeah.
I might just be a little salty about it, but
I know the kid in Calypso is sort of like a thing, so like the durability piece maybe isn't
yeah,
as big of a deal for the first two turns, but I think it's going to be a lot easier just to, if you put him in a bad spot, just to lose one
yeah.
of them, to your
And this
point.
just feels a lot like the Sommer changes, where 1 or 2 changes are fine. 3, 4, everything on their
Yeah.
card changing is painful.
Yeah.
Um,
I would say of all of the changes I see on here as an opponent, the things that I think might have been a little too far are the health reduction and losing secret mission,
yeah,
especially where you have to pay for the totems now.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. They're
I
almost
guess
useless totems.
I guess part of the problem with secret mission is that eyes and ears are so damn cheap. Like you can still hire 3 to 5 eyes and ears and the 2 totems, and like you're only in it for what, like 12 stones. And
Yeah,
that's a lot of AP of insignificant models. So I don't know. Maybe secret mission still needed to go, but the health reduction is definitely a bridge too far.
we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
You know, I have been wrong before, and this
Mm,
is on recording now, so you guys all know I have been wrong before once or twice. I could be wrong again.
yeah. So let's move on to guild, shall we?
Yeah,
Yeah. So Hoff 2, the ever-present boogeyman in guild. So Hoff 2 had a number of changes, not quite as expansive as some of the ones that we've seen so far, but there were some pretty significant ones in here. So the big one, the real boogeyman, is the alternating current. So people have been saying for a long time it should have been a projectile. It was pretty silly that it could shoot into combat, that it could shoot while he was engaged. Now it's a projectile, just the way that it should be. And then once per turn for each target, which is pretty significant. You can't just zorch somebody down by using command construct, which we're going to get to later. But this is a little bit more future proofing. And it's max damage increase to +2. So I believe that caps it at, is it 3 irreducible now? Or is it still 4?
it's 3, I think.
3, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
Okay. So it caps it at 3 irreducible from 4, and then it has the normal restrictions of a projectile attack. All pretty reasonable, I think. It was, a bit much, to say the least, before.
yeah,
Couple other big ones are the arc nodes no longer give shielded at all, which is kind of important because that crew has so much healing and so much armor that I think the shielded on top of it was just a little bit too much to chew through for most crews, even if you teched into it.
yeah.
Um,
Armor 2 plus
yeah,
shielded is really good, even for a crew that has a lot of
yeah.
low hit point count.
Yep. And they also made it so that you can't gain power tokens from both an arc node and the power converter ability at the same time. So it just reduces the amount of power tokens that the crew can generate, which with the arc nodes in play was a little excessive. I mean, you already get a lot of them, but it turned them into kind of a non-resource for a couple of models. Like you could just spend them whenever you wanted to, and it wasn't really a problem.
I mean, I think he's fine.
Yeah,
I think these bring him in line, and he's not just going to. You're not just going to get Min Ford to right off the board
hmm
anymore, while not being able to remove his models. The
hmm
Construction Claw is probably one of actually, along with Alternate Current. I feel like the Construction Claw being only a 1 inch place or places in 1 inch is probably one of the biggest changes on this card, because Construction Claw was absolutely insane for kidnapping a model. When you have a
yeah,
50 millimeter model with Construction Claw is a 2 inch melee,
yeah,
so 2 inch melee, he can reach you from 2 inches away on a 50 millimeter and then throw you within 2 inches of him. That's
yeah.
just so far.
It was wild.
Yeah,
And it's not like it's a bad attack now because it still has electroshock, which is like arguably one of the best triggers in the game. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, for sure.
And puncture on a 245 track on a 2-inch engage, like it's very, very good.
Sorry, it's still efficient kidnapping. You're
Oh yeah,
still moving them essentially 5 inches, something like that. Like it's still good.
yeah, and like there's nothing wrong at this point with literally just bulldozing Hoffman near a ball of models and electroshocking to
Yeah,
stun and injure all of them.
yeah.
I mean, that's pretty good, and it can be game breaking in some cases.
Bulldoze is probably one of the best abilities to come
Bulldoze
out
is
of the
bonkers.
last book.
Yeah. And like the only other really significant change is the power spike trigger on his alternating current is now enemy only, which is kind of good because it means that you can't cheese ball it and turn one alternating current one of your models for one irreducible and then just pass out power tokens to your whole crew. Um, yeah, again, pretty reasonable. Um, the security defenses thing, they just made it slightly harder to go off. It basically reduced from a stat 6 to a stat 5. Like, okay, who cares? So overall, I don't think that this is drastically going to change the power dynamic of that crew. I think they're still very good. And it gets rid of the incentive along with one of the core rule changes for doing the kind of toxic double master thing,
Yeah.
and just cheesing alternating current. I still think he's super strong, and I think he's one of those masters that his title version and his vanilla version are pretty close in parity to each other. So
Yeah.
you run into Hoffman, you could really be seeing either of them.
And I think it really opens up because he is a dual master. I think you were seeing a lot of Arcanists play Hoffman and a lot of Guild play Hoffman. So this is going to open up, I think, some of the other Guild and Arcanist masters to get a little more play. And I'm always a fan of more masters seeing more play, of more variety in the game. The other big guild one is Lady Justice
Yeah.
Death Touched. She got a massive rework,
Yeah. I
honestly.
am fully going to let you take the lead on this one because I am going to be completely honest. I have never used Lady J2. I have never played against Lady J2. So you are on your own on this one.
Okay. So, in general, what happened with her is that she lost a lot of her kidnap abilities to be replaced with making her crew just a little bit more consistent, which is good because that's another NPE section. Like, too many enemy berries, I think, are just bad. They just
Oh,
feel
yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they're game winning or not. It just feels bad to have your model stuck in a void going, well, I activate them, go. Like, gross. Nobody wants to do that.
Yeah.
So I think this is good. Lady Justice was very hard to get rid of between LLC, hard to wound, regeneration. So they took out regeneration ability. They replaced Kytherian Sight with Beyond Time because we already had Beyond Time, so there's no reason to make another ability. The big things you're looking at is Marshall's Coffin now requires a discard instead of taking a damage, and the coffin marker has to be within base contact of the enemy model, not within 1 inch. And that is both not great and also pretty good because guild mages exist. So
Yeah.
now a marshal can discard a card, heal from a guild mage, and get a coffin. Like, considering that is on models that have hard to kill, very important.
Yeah, definitely. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's kind of, on the one hand, you need to have the card to discard, so it does reduce the number of these that you could theoretically put on the table because, like, this crew does have access to a good bit of healing.
Mhm.
So a lot of times taking one damage seems like it would be kind of irrelevant.
Yep. They
Yeah.
also gave friendly marshals the ability to ignore coffin markers when drawing sightlines. Very important. There's a lot of guns and a lot of ranged abilities. Domadors need to be able to see people. Lone Marshal needs to be able to see people to shoot them. Death Marshals they have a gun. Jury also is a ranged model, so everybody in the crew kind of has a gun. So being able to see through coffins is good.
Yeah, that's
Um,
great.
on the backside of her card, they just kind of rearranged everything. So they took They took Ashwood Coffin and made it from a bonus action to a main action. It's still only doable once per turn, but it has a built-in trigger to take it again, which is,
Mhm.
if you miss, which is cool. I kind of like that. It it's got a little bit. I don't have the other one in range, but I think it's got a little bit more range now. Um, and Ashwood Coffin is the thing that made people a little frustrated, being able to just bury things. Um, so you get a chance to do it again. It's not by any means bad. They took Equilibrium, which is her shockwave, and made it into a bonus action.
Mhm.
They also made it a little bit better. Um, they fixed the TNs on it. Um, and now it ignores marshals can just ignore it and heal too, which is awesome. Gave it a surge trigger because she's discarding cards, so she does need to be able to
Yep.
heal back.
Yep.
Burial rites can now be used as a bonus action, so she has a choice of like how she wants to use her actions. I think that's all really, really good. Entropic Debt, which is her gun action, it got adjusted to a 6 instead of a 5 plus. Um, and it hands out adversary marshal if they're undead, which this crew has the ability to turn models undead.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and more healing. Focus cleansing allows her to heal. She's different. I will
Yeah.
say that. She's very, very different. I think that this is a sideways buff. I don't necessarily see it as completely a nerf. I think they're just changing how she plays. They're pulling her
Yeah.
away from a sort of negative play style where all you do is run in and kidnap models. When you look at that and you look at the 33 nerf that we'll talk about later, um, they're making it more player friendly and you don't feel like crap playing it and you don't feel like crap
Mhm.
playing against it. So overall, I think that she is weaker in some ways, stronger in other ways.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. She really got kind of a mixed bag.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see her on the table. Like I said, I have no personal experience with it.
Yeah.
Looking over these changes, especially taking into account, like you said, the 33 stuff. Um, the thing that really stands out the most to me is Marshall's being able to ignore all those coffins for line of sight. That
Yeah,
strikes
it's
me as a
big.
pretty big
That's big.
deal. Pretty big deal.
And honestly, like she's still good. She's got sixes across the board on her main stats. Like that's pretty
Yeah.
solid. She's still hard to wound. She still can have LLC. She has plenty of healing in the crew. And anytime you have to discard a card in guild, you just have a guild mage to heal you back up.
Yeah,
Um,
and that equilibrium change, the more that I think about it, that's pretty huge. Making equilibrium into a bonus action that drops a shockwave 2 that heals 2 on all friendly models that get hit by it, plus
yeah.
has the potential to draw a card. That's pretty awesome.
Yep, I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
And she also has the ability to pulse focus. Like it's all good. It's all very, very good. I think she's fine. I think once people adjust to how she plays, she'll be fine. And bringing Hoffman down a little bit will give her more chance to be played. And honestly, she's still better than Justice One.
Yeah, all right. So moving on to Neverborn, we have Pandora Tyrant Torn. So pretty short and sweet on this one. Essentially, aspect of fortune just gives you a plus flip on defense duels. Um, no shelter here is the ability that she could use to make a 3-inch aura around a target enemy model hazardous to other enemy models. The aura on that just got reduced to 2 from 3, which is very reasonable. A 3-inch aura, especially if it's on a big model like a 40 or a 50 base, is a huge area of the board. Um, Going down to 2 is pretty significant, but still very big.
Yeah.
Um,
She got better.
yeah, potentially. Expose Fear is now once per activation. Oh, where'd my card go? There we go. Expose Fear is the thing where when a model takes misery damage, it gets moved up to 2 inches. Pretty straightforward. You just can't spam it multiple times in the same activation anymore, which is fine. especially where you could make areas of hazardous terrain, being able to bump an enemy model around multiple times when they're taking misery damage and they're getting moved in hazardous and taking more damage, like they would just melt. It was really dumb.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, she gained a unique ability, which I think she's the only model in the game with. Heed no fear. She cannot gain the adversary condition because she has Luck Thief, and that's stupid.
Yep. Yeah. It was exploitive and dumb.
Yeah.
Plus to a, I'll take the plus to a defense duel. Plus to a defense duel on a model that already has Luck Thief. So yeah, she definitely can cheat still off the top of the Fate deck, which for a master is both good and bad. You don't want to cheat a duel where you're going to take punishment, a really big hit. If you flip, moderate, you're not going to cheat and get worse. The only thing at time is really good is when you flip 2 weak cards and then you have the potential to flip a better card on the cheat. So I like it. I still think it's good. I think it would be absolutely absurd if Neverborn had more ways to sort of rig the deck. Dreamer. So I still think she's really, really good as a second master in a Nightmare Crew.
That what you just said was straight up a low blow to all of those folks who are still lamenting the fact that Lynch is not Neverborn anymore.
Oh,
he
I
literally
know.
has
I
rigged
know.
the deck.
I have a friend who literally isn't playing anymore because of that change.
People get so salty.
Yeah.
33. 33. 33 is short and sweet. 33 does not have Pine Box anymore, which is awesome. You can't do the stupid 33 kidnap, which never should have been a playstyle in the first place. Now 33 instead has an ability called Torn into the Void, which we'll just read through just for everybody's sake. It is a stat 6 on willpower, enemy only, 2/3/5 damage. If this model's final duel total is at least 3 more than the target, it may place itself or the target anywhere within 1 inch of their current position. It does potentially have the ability to bury with it with Glimpse the Void, but your opponent has some say in the matter. They can just hold on to the card to cheat and beat the TN14 willpower duel. And it has Slam the Coffin. Once per turn, create a 50 mil height 2 blocking, destructible, impassable coffin marker in base contact with the target. So, that's pretty much it. Oh, and they can't draw Jokers with Backtrack anymore, which was dumb anyway. Yeah. So that obviously significantly changes the playstyle of Terra 2, because I think that most Terra 2 players, at least the ones that I've come across, were really crutching on the rewind, kidnap, toxic kind of rules interaction. I will be very interested to see what Terra 2 looks like now that that's not an option anymore.
You know what? I think it created a one-dimensional playstyle for her, so I think this is actually better in the long run for her longevity. And I know Malifaux people, I'm taking a very balanced look at this, and I'm not heated about anything, and that's not how we do things, but that's, I'm kind of seeing it as, this what this is. It's taking out frustrating static NPE, consistent NP playstyle. Because if you have a game where it's going to go really, really badly occasionally, that's one thing. But when the game is consistently frustrating for you to play against or play with, that becomes an issue.
Yeah,
and I think
definitely.
that's once again what this is doing.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. All right, moving on to the Rezzers. I have very strong feelings about both of the Rezzer changes. We're going to get into that, but why don't we start with Kirai, Envoy of the Court.
So Resurrectionist did not get touched at all last cycle, except for the quick fix to Doug too. So I was kind of happy to see something happen, because Resurrectionists, on the whole, the Resurrectionist faction is just solid. They don't have a lot that's not good. They don't have a lot that's like, holy crap, this is breaking the game, except for Yanlo 2 really was. But they're all very, very strong. So to see them get a little bit of work, I'm okay with.
To steal a little bit of Pope DARPA, aka Landon's thunder, he consistently says that Res are sniff glue because they have access to ridiculous rules that nobody else has access to. I'm not quite that salty about it, but I will say that both of the two masters that got adjusted, I feel like definitely needed the adjustments pretty severely. Kirai Envoy, I've played against a number of times, and it can be an extremely frustrating experience. So, some of the changes that they made, why don't you take this one?
Okay.
Because I sure am going to have a lot to say about the Yanlo.
Oh
So,
yeah,
you,
that's
you
fine.
take
That's
Kirai.
fine. All right, so Kirai, they changed Join Us because, well, we already had Join Us, so they changed it to Chain Spirit. They limited it to within 8 inches, and it can only be caused by models of cost 5 or higher, and then they reduced the TN to resist it. This is a good change because, like, you can't just pick totems and spam it on totems and just spam drop models on small models that often don't have the stats to resist properly.
Yeah.
So I think this is fine.
Yeah, it really reduces the amount of snowballing too, because
Yeah.
the ability summons models of cost 4 or lower, which means basically Gaki, Enslaved Spirits, and Seishin. And those models can't trigger Chain Spirits tests anymore because the models triggering it have to be cost 5 or higher. So you can't just snowball like crazy by summoning a bunch of small models and creating 32 zillion activations
Yeah.
that slow down the whole game and bog up your opponent and yada, yada, yada,
Yeah.
yada, yada.
They also put a suit on the Ikirio summon.
Yeah. Which is fine. It's super strong. It probably should have had a suit anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sundering, which was her ability everybody complained about, now goes to a maximum of 2 damage, so it's not an unlimited amount of damage depending on how many models. I think this is fine. This encourages you to not go too insane on Chain Spirit summoning.
Yep. And it's consistent with other changes that they've made to make sure that they fix any potential sources of uncapped damage
Absolutely.
increases. So, yeah. There you go.
And then her revenge ability, which affects negative willpower duels to enemy models with adversary. They made it so that it only affects duels generated by Kirai and Akirio, and only against actions targeting Kirai. So her whole crew does not benefit from putting you on negative willpower duels all the time. This is important because that felt like shit.
Right. If I remember correctly, and I could be wrong because they've already updated the models in the app, so I can't look at the old version. I don't think that actions targeting Kirai were previously affected by revenge. Somebody can correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure that that's the case, which is actually kind of important because that increases her survivability a little bit. I mean, she's already 13 wounds, which is great, but she kind of has to be in the middle, and she doesn't have any other defensive abilities aside from, if you take the new 6-stone minion that can take the hit, or like Ashigaru or something. So I'm pretty sure that that's a buff, but I could just be misremembering it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate this. I think that it brings her down to the line. I think it takes everything people were complaining about and fixes it. It'll be interesting to see where she sits. I think GG3 was not super great for her, or Kirai 1, so I think she's kind of sitting out the season a lot anyway. But the next person we're talking about is
Boy.
and I feel like they might as well have rewritten this card. So go ahead.
Yeah. So Yanlo 2 is my white whale. Yanlo 2 is the master that I have struggled against more than basically any other master in the game. And boy, oh boy, did they change him and his reliquary up a whole lot.
Yes.
They basically touched every one of the complaints that I had about this master. So without being all like neener, your toys are broken to all the Reser and Thunders players out there, we'll just kind of go through this one at a time. So big one is his ranged attack, Twisting Reality, doesn't have Hole in the World anymore, and instead has Knock Aside. So Knock Aside is just a 4-inch push, whereas Hole in the World was place the model anywhere within 6 inches of its current position, which that allowed you to do some absolutely ridiculous kidnaps, like picking up models and putting them on the opposite sides of buildings, opposite sides of walls, in places your opponent's never going to be able to get to them again. And to have that on a master that could stone for it on a ranged attack targeting defense or willpower, like, it was
Absolutely
really dumb.
nuts.
It was really dumb. It was basically impossible to do anything about. If the Yanlo 2 player wanted to Hole in the World, you were going to get Hole in the World at least once, potentially twice, every time.
Yep.
All right, so Spirit Guide used to be on his Obey. Basically, it was only usable, I believe it was on friendly ancestors, and it gave them focus. Now it got replaced with Preparations, which just straight up gives focus. Which is actually better because now he can obey non-ancestor models and give them that buff. On the flip side, his Lingering Voices ability, which previously baked in the suit that he needed, the mask for his obey, and the tome to give out that trigger, now doesn't give the tome. So you have to stone or have the card for it, which is fair. I mean, just having a suited obey is already really strong, but having a suited obey that also gives out focus every time was a little goofy. Yeah, a bit much. A couple other big changes. Ancient Anchor got changed up. So now after deployment, you attach the Reliquary Yanlo upgrade to a friendly retainer minion or soul porter in play. And then after a friendly model with a Reliquary Yanlo upgrade ends a move from a general action, not from pushes, places, Hole in the Worlds, knock-asides, that kind of thing. So they have to actually like take a walk either on their own or be obeyed to walk. Then you can place this model within an inch of it. So that just, it allowed your opponent the ability to pull one of those models out of position without necessarily, without allowing Yanlo to kind of follow along, which is cool. He also has stat 5 instead of stat 6 for his defense, which is fine because he is already incorporeal and hard to get to because he has take the hit models in his keyword. Were you going to say something, Maeve?
Oh, I was just going to say he doesn't zip completely across the board anymore attached to a dog. Like,
right.
It's good.
Right.
It's necessary.
Right.
He was insanely
Absolutely.
fast for something with 2 move.
Mm-hmm. They also got rid of the utterly ridiculous clear the path front of card ability that just let him for free without any actions to pick up multiple markers near him and draw cards. So now he has Spirit Guide instead, once per activation. After a friendly retainer, minion, or soul porter attaches a reliquary upgrade, draw a card. Pretty straightforward.
Okay. Drawing cards is good.
Drawing cards is good. It still gives him a little bit of card draw, and it allows him to draw cards after he uses his guard reliquary trigger on his final wishes ability to give out upgrades to other models around him. But it doesn't break the game by picking up like 3 markers and letting him draw 3 cards every activation. Speaking of final wishes, TN went up by 2, stat went up by 1, and it gained a built-in crow. This is kind of a good thing. He does need a 4 instead of a 5. He needs a 5 instead of a 4 now, which is like not that big a deal. But he gets the built-in stat for his guard reliquary trigger, where he can attach reliquary upgrades to friendly retainer models within 8 inches, based on other ancestor models that he's hired in during that game. They also got rid of Weary Road, which we all know Weary Road's an amazing ability. It was just unnecessarily strong on his card, especially with all the other tech that he brings to the table. So now he has Choose the Path as his bonus action instead. Needs a 6 to go off, friendly only, move the target up to 3 inches, then either drop a scheme marker into base contact with the target or remove a marker in base contact with the target. So this was kind of a sideways buff, because before, Weary Road was just no flip required, move the model 3 inches and drop a scheme marker. Couple things here. Because this is not a general action, when you Weary Road, it doesn't allow you to use the Ancient Anchor to place within an inch of the model that you just Weary Roaded. But this actually gives you the option to still pick up a marker during his activation because he lost Clear the Path. So, like, he still has a little marker removal, he still has a little card draw, but he doesn't have a ton of both for free.
he does all the same stuff he used to without being able to pay for it now. Like, he doesn't do it as efficiently.
Yep. Yep. And then the other things are the Terrible Wish trigger on his Final Wishes ability, which frankly didn't really get used that often. Most of the time you'd used it for the Guard Reliquary, unless it was like getting on towards the middle or the end of the game. Is basically now immediately, and they just did some housekeeping where you have to choose an enemy model within range as part of the cost instead of part of the ability itself. Essentially, immediately the target must either discard a card or gain adversary um, before the rest of the attack, before the rest of the ability resolves. So, no big deal there. Primarily housekeeping. The other big stuff are his upgrade actually got changed. It's now restricted to Retainer Minion or Soul Porter. So you can't through goofy means put them on something that it shouldn't have been on in the past. The other one is Heavy Burden. This model ignores the Empty Vessel ability, so that's going to affect Gokudo and Komayinu. So basically, they're not going to go up to like move 7 or whatever they were, move 6, and get the plus flips on their defense tools and attacks and stuff like that. Being able to just give out a free upgrade that gave a bunch of utility to Yanlo, plus made these things super fast and super reliable with all their attacks and defense, was a bit over the top. It just made it very difficult to play against them. And then lastly, Release the Soul now only automatically attaches the Reliquary Yanlo model upgrade to a model within 8 inches of Yanlo. That is a huge change. Basically, you can't have him following around a Komayinu on one side of the board, another one that's, 22 inches away on the other side of the board. The dog you're near dies, and the Reliquary shoots all the way across to the board to the other dog. That dog walks, and then all of a sudden Yanlo is right next to it.
Silly.
little silly. So, again, not to rain on the Yanlo players' parades, I do still feel like he is very, very strong. They've toned down most of the super NBE stuff about his card. I suppose time will tell. Again, there's gonna be a lot of time will tell with these changes, but I don't really see him being taken down drastically. Maybe he's not S+ tier anymore, arguably the best master in the game, in my opinion. Now, I would say, if we're talking about tier list stuff, he's probably still solidly in the A's, in my opinion. But what do you think, Maeve? I just basically talked there. I didn't give you a chance to butt in.
No, you're good. You're good. I haven't had a whole lot of experience with him. The only games I felt good about the games were when I just turn 1 killed both Kamino.
Yeah.
And that
right, and that was the problem.
Yeah,
right.
The game
was the problem
at that point.
The game plan against Yanlo 2 previously was, I have to kill a Komayinu turn 1, I have to kill a Komayinu turn 2, and hope that he's not in a position where he can affect the rest of the game.
Now, if you kill one of those Komayinu, he's going to struggle to get around, which is fine. And I do think you have to maybe take a more, you do have to hire Gokudo. He does have to be careful his Soul Porter stays in play so that he can be a last-minute reliquary grab.
Definitely.
Do you think this is going to give a little more playback to Yanlo 1, who we haven't seen almost at all since his nerf?
Yeah, and I get that he was nerfed and stuff. I still feel like Yanlo 1 is extremely strong. And I feel like this change probably brings the two kind of in parity with each other. I'll be quite honest, I still struggle sometimes against Yanlo 1, even after his adjustments. I think he's great.
That's definitely
and I think Yanlo 2 is still
up Yanlo 1.
Yeah, I think Yanlo 2 is also great. So I still think these guys are going to get a lot of play.
Absolutely. And that's it. That's all the models they touched. They didn't think anything in 10 Thunders needed some adjustment. I would say that 10 Thunders is very, very strong at the moment, but I don't know that there's anything in 10 Thunders that I'm just wary of seeing, throwing in a massive NPE, except for Terra 2, who has been adjusted. So,
You just said Thunders, but that's
oh,
Outcast.
sorry, not Thunder. Sorry, Outcast. Yeah, sorry. Thunder's got two
Outcast.
technically with Mei Fang and Yanlo, but yeah, Outcast are. There's not really anybody in Outcast that I'm just like,
Yeah.
this is the worst game I've ever played. They are very strong right now,
Yeah.
which is fine.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so kind of moving on to some of the core rules changes. We'll just kind of go through these quickety quick. Maeve, why don't you highlight some of the big ones for us?
Okay, so upgrade limitations is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it basically just takes the special upgrade rules for Thierry's crew and Damien's crew and just codifies them in the main rulebook. That's really all it does.
And
Yeah,
Ivan's double sided.
and Ivan's,
Yeah.
and Ivan's. Yeah,
Um, Red Joker has a suit or no suit. Very
yeah,
important. You can choose for it to not have a suit in case.
yeah. There's a couple corner case things like Yoko's ability where you can like get rid, like you can flip a bunch of cards on your opponent's deck and then choose a suit and make them get rid of those. Now you can just make the Red Joker not have a suit, so it doesn't count as all four of them. Of your opponent's choice or whatever.
Cards in the
Your choice.
conflict being discarded is very important because that cleans things up and it takes away
Yeah.
some of the rules complications, especially in cases where you models want to look at the top card of the discard pile or anything like that. Like there are several
Yep.
cards that
There's a couple of things that interact with that particular rules change. Like there's a trigger on Mikhail, in memoriam, I think is what it's called, where you can let me get here. So in memoriam, choose a non-joker in the top 5 cards of this model's discard pile. Place the chosen card on top of the model's fate deck. So just making sure that you're clarifying the timing between attack flips, damage flips, negative flips, double negative flips, that kind of thing. Is important, and then it certainly has an effect on things like Euripides. Basically, just ensuring that cards go to the discard pile in the proper order.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to see us sometime soon really see a very like dug in and clarified version of exactly what the timing charts are.
What are you, a Magic player?
I think it's necessary. I mean, I was
Yeah, I
there.
know it is.
I
I'm
was there
just
playing
bluffing.
Magic before the stack existed, and it was not a great time.
No,
Um,
no, definitely
so
not.
so I think that it would be good for these little arguments in the game. So yeah, I think that we could use just a full clarification of what timing looks like because
Yeah.
every time there's a complex question in the game, it's almost always based around timing.
Yep. Going back and giving them a good once over is probably a good idea for sure.
Yeah, being able to relent friendly duels very important for McMorning, for Brewmaster, for Maxine 2, for probably other masters that I'm just not like thinking of right now. It'll also mean that in future cards we can cut out that
Yeah, they can trim out text, exactly.
text. Yeah.
And just for clarification's sake, in case anybody missed this one, they added a section to Relenting where a friendly model can always choose to automatically fail a simple duel generated by another friendly model. So shockwaves, any number of other things. It's tremendously beneficial for a couple of models, like Maeve said, McMorning, the whole crew really. Ivan's cruise, so on and so forth, and it's future proofing. So yeah,
falling changes.
they basically just cleaned up falling.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they clarified some stuff. Yeah,
Same thing with climbing. They cleared up climbing.
the big one with climbing is that now you can only go up, but you can only climb using a walk action. Like not if you get lured and you're moving towards something, not a push but a move, you still can't climb it. It can only be done with an actual walk. That's a big deal. Yeah.
Important to know: models always have line of sight to themselves, even while buried, and always have line of sight to any object or terrain they are in base contact with overlapping. Just clarification. Just good clarification.
They cleaned up a little bit of stuff on line of sight and size 0 models, which are very rare. I think it's like Gups and maybe a couple other things, but a little bit of cleanup there, so no big deal. And then one other change, which is interesting, it kind of makes me wonder about kind of the future of the game or what they might have in in mind, or maybe it's just a balance change for newer metas. But essentially, masters only get 3 actions in 50 soulstone or higher games. So if you're running like a slow grow league where you start out at like 25 stones, 30 stones, whatever, even masters that are in the game are still only going to get 2 actions. It also brings things in line with things like Henchman Hardcore and Double Rush, where the leaders in those formats only get 2 actions. So
I think that's good for being able to dip into different formats. It seems like it seems like if you looked at the hiring packet that they put out recently looking for designers, one of the things they were asking for is if you were to create your own format, what would it be? So I think maybe they're starting to look at like, yes, we love our 50 Soulstone games, but what can we do to do different things with the game? Which
yeah,
is fun. I'm
definitely.
always down for that.
And I think that one of the complaints that a lot of players have had recently, especially with all these models being added that are very complex, is that games just take a long time to
Mm-hmm.
play. Malifaux is complicated as shit, and games, they say that you can get a game done in 2 hours, or they said you could get a game done in 2 hours in GG2, or in second edition rather. They bumped that up to 2.5 hours in third edition. I keep saying GG. And I think we all realistically know, if you go to a tournament, like how many of those games actually finish all 5 turns.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a small, maybe not a fraction of them, but certainly not all of them. I would venture to guess it's probably only around 60% or even a little bit less that
Yeah.
finish all the turns. So it just makes me wonder if they're doing this as a future proofing mechanism to potentially reduce the standard soulstone size of the game, and that excites me.
Could be interesting. Yeah.
This is strictly conjecture, but what I would really like to see, and is something that we have seen in in Madness of Malifaux in particular, is that we have a lot of small, like low cost models that are much more well balanced than 5 and 6 stone models have been in the past, and particularly some of the 5 stone models. I would be very interested to see if they move towards reducing the standard size of the game down to maybe 40 stones, which could potentially speed games up significantly, especially if masters are only getting 2 AP. Whether or not that's balanced, I don't know, because most masters are probably balanced around having 3 AP. But, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. One of the other things that's really interesting is that the restriction for non-leader means that it cannot target a model with a master characteristic. This is to take out exploitation of the Mayfang Hoffman 2 when you're playing a dual master game, and the Thierry Cooper combo or Thierry Von Schill combo that would be available once Madness of Malifaux hits. So
Yep.
I think that's a needed thing that should have happened a long time ago.
Yep.
Especially because that Mayfang list could have potentially gotten 3 obeys on Hoffman, which is insane. Because you could take May, or you could take May, you could
Mayfang
take
2,
May 2
Sparks, and Joss.
and Joss.
Yep.
Yeah, so all 3
Yep.
of those. So I'm glad that's good.
Yep. And it's future proofing as well.
Yeah.
It means they literally don't have to worry about it ever again.
Never again.
It's done.
Absolutely.
Which is awesome.
Can't break the game if it's doesn't exist. Black Jokers do not generate any blasts.
Yep.
That's key, niche, but important.
They cleaned up friendly and enemy control stuff
friendly
too.
and enemy control is a little cleaned up. Yeah.
Yeah, big one there. And this was kind of a niche thing, but like if you had 2 models that were next to each other and one of them had like Wicked, or we're doing like a disengaging strike, where Wicked allows you to take a melee attack instead of a disengaging strike when something tries to disengage from you. Previously, if you obeyed a model to try and disengage from one of your models with Wicked, then you would control both sides of the duel. So you were flipping your attack with your model and your opponent's defense. This takes care of stuff like that, so that anytime a model is ever resisting in an opposed duel, the model is always controlled by its owner. So you're not taking away your opponent's ability to defend their own model.
Yep.
Which is important. Niche, but important.
Yeah, absolutely. Skipping down a little bit, focus can now be used on simple duels, on any duel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's niche but big deal as well. So you can use focus on terrifying duels. You can use focus to resist shockwaves. Um, all good
Yep.
impulses
All
and
good
all good
stuff.
stuff.
Yep. They cleaned up rounding,
Yep.
which is not huge, but basically you always round down unless the I'm sorry, you always round to the wholest number except for movement, which isn't rounded, and then a few other things that they give specific call outs
Yep.
to. So we'll leave it at that.
They coded the summons can't take interaction off of strategy markers into the base rules. So that's not just in the GG now, that's in the rules. So if you are frustrated about that when it comes to summons, this is the way it is. I'm going to have a little section here at the end that we talk about that and my thoughts on what to do about that.
Yep.
Uh,
They also codified area between. So there's a couple of weird things like the Pythagorean quake on surveyors and a few other things like where you actually have to determine an area on the board between two markers or between two models. And this basically just puts an explanation for that into the base rules, which is important.
and Aura terrain is now considered aura, so if a model creates an aura around them, it is considered terrain for all purposes, and the aura is treated as being in base contact with that terrain. That's important for models like the Kurgan,
Yeah.
and anything that like
Grave goo.
yeah,
Sorry,
Grey
Longton.
Goo.
I'm going to apologize to Longton because I ruled against him about that last
Yeah.
Captain Con. Sorry, bud.
No, there was some salt. There was some salt.
There, a little bit, a little
But
bit.
yeah, so that just clears it up. It's good, it's good to clear up. They cleared up hazardous terrain a little
Like a
bit.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, big one there. I think that the big addition, because there's a lot to parse in this hazardous terrain thing. I might be missing it, but basically the big one is after a hazardous terrain marker is moved and comes into base contact with the model actually moving it, um, the model can choose to ignore the hazardous effects of that moved marker. So, like, if you're moving a hazardous marker with one of your model's effects and it goes through you, it doesn't damage you unless you want it to.
Yeah.
Which
Perfect.
is probably kind of niche, but good.
Other than that, I really think there's not anything. I think those are the big ones.
It was mostly just cleanup.
Yeah.
After that, so yeah, there you go.
I don't really think.
Oh, that the other big one is choosing additional masters, and this just further clarifies that targeting restrictions piece. Any additional masters hired into a crew are treated as a leader for all effects that refer to non-leader, but for no other effects. So again, more future proofing.
Yep. All good. All good. So really that's it. I think it was, I mean, I say that's it. It's a lot of big changes.
A lot.
A lot of small
Yeah,
changes.
we got through a lot there.
Changes. Yeah.
So that's the whole errata packet. That's the FAQs. That's the model changes. Everything. So, kind of bringing it home here. What do you feel like should have been nerfed this round but missed it?
I don't understand how guild mages did not make it into this. I get that they were only really doing title models, but guild mages have become absolutely ubiquitous in guild crews, and they're so frustratingly good. Anytime you see them, you have to kill them, but killing them is a pain in the butt because they're usually protected by a round of models that will absolutely be healing up because there's a lot of just incidental discards inside guild. Like if you think of Dashel with shouting orders, like you get focus and you heal. Cool. I hate that. So I'm really, really shocked Guild Mage did not make it into this errata.
Yeah. And building on that, I mean, there's a couple other guild models that I'm really surprised didn't make it in. Perdita 2 is probably top of my list. I know you have some strong feelings about Perdita 2, so do I. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the efficiencies that she brings being untouched, while Ophelia was touched in very much the same ways that Perdita probably should have been, is very surprising to me. I do feel like Perdita 2 is kind of not kind of, is a very negative play experience for the opponent. And I really feel like
especially newer opponents.
Especially newer opponents, but even seasoned ones. I mean, you play against somebody who's got a zillion games under their belt, and sometimes there's just not that much you can do against her, you know? Dashel 2 is kind of the same way.
Yeah, one of the big things with me for Perdita 2 is the fact that there is a 6-inch aura on the upgrade on her summon minions. 6-inch aura for what it does is absolutely absurdly big.
Yeah.
I really am surprised that did not get kicked down to 3 inches. Just to make it like so you don't have to stretch, or you can't stretch out as much with your 12-inch range guns and everything, Um, yeah,
Yeah,
it's frustrating to
for
see
sure.
that she didn't make it at all.
Dashel 2, I really feel like should have been in there. There's a lot of issues with the amount of unresistible damage that he can potentially put out. It's the whole second slice thing is a tricky topic, and I think the most offensive thing is him allowing his whole crew to use soul stones is really, really, really too much. I know you're using a resource in doing that, but his crew can also generate soul stones like crazy, so it's like not that big a deal.
If they do what
Um,
they're supposed to be doing, they just generate the soul stones back.
Yeah,
I'm like, cool.
it's really, really, really over the top. If they had to adjust anything, I would say that they just need to get rid of that ability to allow his crew to use soul stones, and then he may very well be in a fine place at
Maybe
that
they
point.
should replace it with a version of Ulik's One Sturdy Critters.
Yeah, something like that. I
Yeah.
mean, finding some way to give them some sort of a benefit, maybe for the damage mitigation piece, but being able to letting them be able to stone for suits is, especially on a crew with such brutal suits, is gross.
Yeah,
It's really
absolutely.
gross. Yeah.
Um, Yoko 2. Yoko 2. Pass tokens are such a dangerous mechanic to manipulate with in the game. And Yoko 2 does that, and she doesn't even care about hiring her own keyword. She can bring an all-star list, get cards out of her discard, out of the game permanently, basically set up to do what the Vix used to do in second edition, which is to just
Hmm.
waste activations until they just come screaming out with
Yep.
mad damage. I'm really shocked Yoko 2 was not looked at.
Yeah, I really feel like, and this comes from somebody who I really enjoy playing Yoko too. I don't know why she doesn't just have leverage like the rest of the crew. Being able to generate 2 pass tokens turn 1 for no investment is ridiculous. It's really, really ridiculous. I know the pass tokens for scoring purposes come into play more in later turns, but being able to guarantee the last activation of the turn and probably still getting a bonus to initiative for the next turn, you know, and with all the hand manipulation that you have, where she can just kind of activate late, draw 2 cards or draw 3 cards from her discard, guarantee you have a 13, and you have a +1 on the initiative for turn 2,
Mm-hmm.
so that you're basically getting unopposed activations at the end of turn 1, plus you're essentially guaranteeing first activation turn 2, is really,
It's
really,
gross.
really busted.
It's so
It's
gross.
really busted. And then you can just continue to do that every turn, because then you've got leverage in play. You're still getting 2 pass tokens for her every turn. You get to do basically the same thing every time.
Yeah.
You're getting last and first activation every turn if you want it.
Yeah. I played a game against Yoko 2 against Landon at Nova, and I literally just felt like there was very little I could do the whole game. Like I just couldn't turn that advantage around to make it work.
We already kind of talked about stuff that we feel like might have been touched a little bit too hard, so we don't need to go back through these, but the ones that we had called out were the Nexus Kids, Maxine 2, maybe, although I think I'm kind of backing off on that one now that we've talked about it a little bit more. I think she's probably in a good spot. And then Ophelia 2 question mark.
Yeah.
Were there any others that you feel like might have been too far?
No, I think that it's more of a matter of can they play or can the meta adjust to playing them in the new way that they do. Yanlo 2 still kind of does the same thing he used to do, but in a very, more restricted manner. Um, Lady J 2 is almost a new card altogether. Like I think there are just going to be some things where you're going to have to adjust how you play with them, and we'll see how it meshes out. Like in competitive play, the cream is always going to rise, so this will give opportunities for new masters to rise up and new things for people to complain about later. Speaking of which, Madness of Malifaux.
Madness of Malifaux. So we talked a little bit ahead of time about stuff, looking through Madness of Malifaux, we've got our books out. We've seen some games, especially for like Witness in particular. What are the things that we feel like need to be most urgently addressed, or potentially should have even been addressed before the book came out, which is always a touchy subject. I mean, they've done it once with McMorning, before he actually hit the table. I'm happy they did it because it was super gross and rules breaking and toxic. Is there anything that you've seen so far in Madness that you really think might be over the top and should potentially have been adjusted or should be very, very soon?
I think Witness is stupid. It's just stupid good. Low hit
Yeah.
Zora should not give positive to damage flips. Should not.
Yeah.
Hands down. Should
Absolutely. It should have.
not.
Low hit Aura is my number one thing that I feel like should have been touched. It should be duels only. That's it. Just duels only. That's all you got to do. Every other ability that does that in the game, as far as I know, is for duels only, not damage flips. Why this one isn't, I could not say.
Damien 2, I think his ability should say give you the chance to like discard to still use triggers or something like that. It's a fine ability on a spell eater. It's an insane ability on a punchy master like that.
Yeah, it's a little bonkers on him.
To kill masters, you really need triggered abilities. You need crit strikes. You need all of those big extra damage triggers and, onslaughts, things like that. And it just makes him so tanky. Meanwhile, he's just wrecking face. So I would like to see an adjustment on Damien 2's main ability.
Yeah, I mean, just the amount of silliness that he can do, like between having redirect magic and then also making it so that you can't use soul stones or draw cards near him. It's too much. It's really too much. Denying opponents the ability to get any kind of triggers or stone for damage or stone to block, like that's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it's really disgusting. Irony. The boat is going to make him so very sad.
Yeah.
Eye of the Hurricane, Eye of the Hurricane and Armor 2 just makes him a sad boy.
Yeah, he won't love that for
sure.
He
will not love that.
Other stuff, I called out. What's that?
I said Tull is a maybe, Tiri is a maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
We need to just watch them. I think they're on the watch list, but I don't know that there's anything that I'm just like, oh my god, this is absolutely bonkers.
Yeah. So I think basically Damien 2 and Lohith need to be adjusted for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
The rest is kind of a wait and see. But yeah, I think I agree with the watch list. Tull, maybe. He just chews through so many resources to do the stuff that his cards say he can do that I think that there's a limitation on how frequently he can actually do that stuff during the turn. Yeah. And then Tiri, especially Tiri 2, can do some real crazy stuff. But again, it's big brain, it's complicated. We'll just have to see how impactful it is on the table.
I'm a little curious about the Arcanist starter box models because they just print pass tokens. Once again, pass tokens are something we've just got to be very careful with about in this game. It's very easy to produce advantages that we don't really consider when we're just looking at how we play with them. So I haven't seen them in play really yet, so I don't really have, a concrete opinion on it. But my initial reaction is this is another thing to kind of put on, a little watch list and see how it goes.
On the watch list, indeed. So, moving on just a little bit, kind of one of the last topics. We did see a couple of buffs, but we really only saw buffs in combination with other adjustments to cards to kind of balance out some of the nerfs that they were seeing. I know buffs are always tough because it's probably a lot more difficult to balance model buffs than it is to balance model nerfs, because model buffs, especially for non-masters, have an effect on the entire faction in some cases. But stuff that's on my wish list, a big one for me is Mayfang 1. I have tried to make her work a bunch of times. I love Mayfang 2, but if somebody ever declares May 2 or Mayfang against you, they're probably always taking 2. The problem is that the only defense that Mayfang 1 really has is armor, and the whole crew has armor, so everybody knows they have to hire anti-armor against her, and then she's just stat 6. So that's it.
I wouldn't hate it.
She needs some kind of a defense trigger. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I wouldn't hate it if she had butterfly jump.
Yeah, butterfly jump might be a little too much. I think that just printing that on a master is a little cray. But I think that just giving her leap aside would be very reasonable. If her ability to build in suits by reducing her duel total by 2 is too good with that, then maybe just make it so it doesn't affect resists. But
Mm-hmm.
just having some kind of way to get out of combat and reduce the number of swings that somebody can take on you would be good. Also, her bonus action is like okay. Sometimes it's really good, but most of the time it's kind of situational, and she doesn't have another bonus action. And a master with a crummy bonus action is basically just a master with one less AP, is what it comes down to.
No, no doubt.
So that needs a little bit of work. One of the ones I called out was Summer, but I'll let you take that one away because that's near and dear to your heart.
The keyword needs a reevaluation. This actually brings me to the point of I think mainline summoners models that their key ability is summoning. So we're looking at Sommer, Sandeep, Dashel, Kirai, Terra to a lesser degree because she doesn't really rely on her summoning all that much. Um, and Asami, I really think, and I guess Ivan as well, right? Like Ivan's in that list too. They really need to be kind of reconsidered, like what they're supposed to be doing in this game. Now that we've seen the summon changes sort of codified, their main abilities just don't feel, it feels like they're working way too hard for models that aren't going to give them any real advantage anymore. Um, and they have a lot of them have models that are built into their keyword that they have to hire these tax models that are 8, 9, 10 points to make things work. So I really think that I would like to see summoners given a significant look at and decide what the devs want to do with them in this game now.
Yeah, I mean, it almost makes me think it's such a bummer because summoners have been just such a big part of the game for such a long time. But if they move into a new edition of the game at some point in the next 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, I would be very, very inclined to just see mainline summoning go the way of the dodo. I don't think it needs to be in the game. It is incredibly hard to balance, and at this point, we went from summoners being the kings of the hill all the way through the last two GGs, and now there's no real reason to play a mainline summoner for the most part, aside from a few exceptions. Like, I think finding that middle ground is so hard because of all the AP that they can bring to the table. I just don't even really feel like they should be in the game anymore.
Yeah, I think they need to be. We need to change what we want to do with them, and the devs really should look at like exactly how they want summoning to interact with the game. I would hate to see it completely taken out because it is such a big part of the game that's been around for forever. But it's clear that it's difficult to deal with. It's clear that it's not a good play experience for people to be against, like waves of summons. But it sucks to have models like Deep One and Sommer One literally never see the table because they just don't work anymore. So that's kind of my big thing. My big wish list is I want to see every mainline summoner master, the whole keyword, honestly, because that's the other thing is that the keyword is usually priced to match summons as
Priced
well.
to summon, right. And then that further complicates things because now we've added titles, and some of the titles might interact with some of those models that are already balanced around summoning. Like, I feel like this is probably not a problem that's going to get addressed until
a new edition.
future edition.
Yeah, because I think we really have to go through the whole keyword and just readjust. Summer, Big Hat
Especially Summer.
Yeah,
especially Summer. I mean, literally the keyword doesn't function properly.
No.
The way that it stands right now.
No.
Like, you can kind of fight your way through some Summer 2 games, but it's not great.
It's hard. It's hard. You're literally fighting with your hands tied behind your back. It's not a fun game.
Yeah. Other stuff that we've called out, I still feel like Ulix 1 needs a little bit more regular access to card draw, and he really should ignore friendly fire on toss slop. It's kind of crazy that he doesn't. this might just this might just be me having some sour grapes here, but I do feel like the Ivan 1 nerfs were too hard. Losing Umbra caused, I think, more problems than it fixed. And then Brocken really need Terrifying back. I think the other changes that they made to him were fine. But one of the things that just came up the other day during a conversation with a friend of mine was that I realized that if you're playing Ivan 1 and you take Hopeful Prospects, they can't even grow into Brocken anymore because Ivan doesn't have the Umbra keyword.
Ugh, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of corner case because, like, how often does that happen? But it's just like it's little stuff like that losing a keyword on a master just has these kind of cascading effects. I think it would have been easier just to say that, making some sort of adjustment to Gibson saying that he can't heal masters with his wrench. Like, that was the big problem, is that he could swing on Ivan and heal him, for 4 or 6 per turn. He shouldn't be able to do that. And there's a better way to fix it.
I think that split keywords should be reevaluated as well.
Yeah.
I just
they get complicated and it gets tough to balance.
Yeah. And it's just annoying. Yeah. It's just annoying when you look at this character and you're like, oh, this would be so good. Witchling, how much more interesting would Witch Hunter be if all of the Witchling buffs affected the whole crew?
Yeah.
And the fact that you have to look and go, oh, that doesn't, like for new players, that's kind of frustrating because like I bought these models, but this model doesn't affect this model. I don't, gross.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other model, I really think like keyword wise, just kind of like, just sort of fails to start, is Tony 1. She's a cool model, fantastic concept, great model. I think that the way her playstyle works has just never really found a niche in competitive play.
Yeah. I feel like it was good when 3E launched, but it's just kind of been left in the dust.
Yeah. Non-mobile crews that want to pull your crews towards them. We have more instances of Planet Roots, more instances of Laugh Off, more ways to stop that. She just kind of sits there and does nothing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, if your opponent doesn't bring the tech or doesn't target appropriately, she can still give him a hell of a game and put him in a bad spot. But there's just so many ways to work around what she does now.
I agree.
All right. That's what we got. So quick competitive predictions for 2023. What are we going to see at Captain Con and beyond?
I think we'll see Damien because he's going to still be the only one out. I don't think we're going to have any of... It'll be interesting to see if people are willing to convert an entire keyword to play.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to play Angler at Captain Con because I think the Clampets are so good and they're so much fun. But I don't know that I'm going to mod a whole keyword.
Yeah, especially a 40 and 50 keyword, 40 and 50 mil bases, like it'd be a lot. And I hate to say it, but I'm just going to say it right now, and I'll say it during the Captain Con app. Like, as much work as some people have put into 3D printing proxies and putting little pictures of the cards on top so that they look like Vassal, or making little plastic standees that they print out, like, that's not an appropriate proxy. Like, you can't be doing that at events. If you're going to do the stuff ahead of time, you just need to put in the time and make some appropriate proxies.
It takes me right out of the game, honestly, to see some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I don't want somebody, and this may just be keeping up appearances, but like, I don't want to see somebody walking into the hall and going up to a bunch of tables and just seeing people playing with little plastic standees or stacks of 3D printed plastic. Like, it's not.
And the fact that we have not seen any release updates for any of the new masters makes me think that they will not be available by Captain Con by February.
Oh yeah, I mean, we might see. We're definitely not going to see anything before then. It's possible they might add some stuff to the January release calendar, but all that stuff doesn't come out until the end of the month at the earliest, and that's too late for Captain Con.
That is to say, if you guys can pull out an amazing conversion for one of these crews that your opponent can really agree on, please bring it. I want to see it. Yep. I would probably caution that if you are going to do that, though, you probably need to like throw it to Jesse before you.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that in the solo ep and just make sure that folks are fully in understanding of what the proxy rules are, and they need to get stuff to me ahead of time because I don't want to rain on people's parades, and I don't want Damien just to run rampant across the whole tournament because he's the only thing that has a model out. But I mean, got to stick to what GG says, guys.
Yeah.
I can't make exceptions.
I think that the biggest change we're going to see in competitive scene in 2023 is the rise of clocks in competitive play. There has been so much talk across the board in the UK and um, other, Australia and across the US now about clocks becoming standard um, for competitive play in Malifaux and how much the people that are using them really enjoy clocks becoming
Yeah.
a major part of the game. So I think that I think eventually this is where we're going to see
Yeah,
the game move.
I think so too. I haven't tried it out yet. I actually bought a clock a little while ago. I haven't cracked it out during a game yet, but I'm very interested to see how it goes. There are some concerns with them. I don't really know how, from a rules standpoint, during the course of an event they will go. But what I would really, really like to see initially is just a game wide adoption of clocks as just a means to kind of keep you honest and
Mhm.
keep you aware of how much time you're spending. Because I feel like if players are being are more aware of how much time they're taking for their models, it's going to be just a natural incentive to kind of speed play up
Mhm.
a little bit. Um,
Yep.
that's where I see it in the midterm. Whether or not we have actual rules for it, I think that's more of a long term discussion.
Yeah.
But it's possible, but complicated.
The other thing that I think is interesting is that the Vassal community has started picking up a format that Maniacal Crackle has dubbed Balance Foe, which is where anything that does not have or has not made it through an errata cycle is not valid for play in that specific tournament setting. So basically, Matt, at this point, because we've seen a errata cycle for titles, um, Madness of Malifaux would not be allowed in a balanced foe setting until it goes through an errata cycle. And a lot of people are pretty happy with this because they don't have to deal with some of the more insane stuff. I think we'll see a little bit more of that. I don't think that'll become mainstream, but it wouldn't surprise me if certain communities don't pick it up.
I think that that's something that we're definitely going to see pioneered in the vassal community where there's no investment of models
Mhm.
to try it out. Once models actually hit the shelves, I mean, people are going to want to play with their new
Play their new
stuff.
stuff. Yeah.
So I don't,
Yeah.
I wonder if that will actually make it out of the vassal verse. Um, we'll see.
Nice.
I probably wouldn't be too thrilled with it. If it did make it out of the vassal verse, then I guess it would put more onus on the devs to make sure that stuff was as balanced as it could be at release. But um,
Yeah.
that's another discussion for another
So
time.
hot take.
Yep.
Rate the keywords coming out in Madness. I want to know where your thoughts are on these keywords. You got six.
You mean like a tier list kind
Kind of a
of
tier list. Yeah.
hot
Yeah.
list? Yeah, for sure. So I would say this is. I'll be honest, I haven't done an exhaustive reading of every single one of them yet. I have done it for a few. If I had to tier stuff, I would put Cavalier with Harold Tull, probably high A, potentially S, but I would say comfortably high A right now. Next up, we've got Castor. I think Castor is very strong, but I feel like it's going to take some practice to unlock him. I think for right now, I'm going to put him in kind of mid B tier.
Mhm.
Although I will say Fervent is pretty beefy looking.
Yes, he is. He was.
Without splitting between V1 and V2 masters, I'm just going to put them solid B tier.
Yep.
Damien is S. He just is. Both of his versions are crazy good. I feel like both of them do stuff that kind of breaks the game, and then Lohith just being there for the rest of the crew is a pretty big deal.
Yep.
Um, Angler and the Clampets, I would say are high A. I wouldn't go so far as to say they're S, just because each version has kind of its own weaknesses, but they're definitely going to be high up in the pack in the
I
Bayou,
think
especially after some of these adjustments.
I think the only thing that holds them back is that several of their models and one of their master titles is very reliant on armor, and armor pen is pretty easy to get
Yeah,
now.
pretty easy to get these
Yeah.
days. And if you declare Angler, your opponent is always going to be well advised to take armor, armor reducing or ignoring stuff.
Yep. And don't take the boat if they pick Hoffman or something has a lot of armor pen in it. Don't take the boat.
Yeah, Red Library is one that I'm still kind of on the fence with. I would put them kind of around the same area as Castor, sort of mid B, maybe high B. There's a lot of really cool stuff in there, but it does require a lot of setup, and it's definitely it can be disrupted.
Yeah, I shifted them to a C. I think I don't think that they're
Right.
very good.
I'm comfortable with them at mid B, but we'll see. And then Tiri, especially Tiri the Architect, is potentially problematic.
Yep.
I would put them high A, maybe S.
Nudging into S. It might depend on
Yeah.
what faction you play because those models, I think, in Tiri and Bygone do such a good thing for outcasts. Having a take the hit model in Outcast is really good. Having, just like solid minions, like there's just a lot of really good benefits for that. And then having just good minions finally and
Yeah.
EXS.
So if you're playing Tiri in Explorers, McCabe 2 Second Master in the Bygone crew is bonkers because they can generate scrap for him, and the Ancient Constructs are minions. They're now the best minions that any Explorer Society crew has access to, aside from botanists.
And explorers have a new achievement. Now your goal is to turn a hopeful prospect into a turn 2 9 stole minion. Let's do
There you go. There you go. So I that's my quick hot take tier list. How close would you say you are on those?
I think Tiri probably I feel like is a little less, or not Tiri, but Lindley falls a little
Not quite as good.
low. Where I think she just struggles to do. I think she just struggles. She does a lot, but none of that stuff feels like it is going to win you games.
Yeah, it has a very kind of Yoko 1 sort of feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like them. I think the book is good. I think there of course will be a little pulling back on some of them. But overall I think they're fun. They feel interesting niches, and it's a good book. It's a really good book.
One thing on Red Library that I'll just call out before we close it is I feel like Red Library and Story do more for Thunders as a whole than they actually do for their own keyword, because man, oh man, do they have some good out of keyword hires.
Oh, they're good, and their enforcers are great. Their enforcers are so good.
Yeah. All right. Well, I would say that pretty much closes it out. Did you have any other closing thoughts before we bid the good folks adieu?
Come to Captain Con. Hang out with us.
Come to fucking Captain Con. That's right. All right. And with that said, everybody, please do keep your conversations boring and stay weird, folks.